when I think about fake it till you make it, every pro was an amateur at one point in time. Every champion was a contender who was pretending to be the champion when he's looking in the mirror. We are all that. We all have that. And I think the idea of fake it till you make it can be a good thing if done properly.
Welcome back, Sales World, to Ready, Set, Sell Season 2. I'm your host today, Donny Wong, and to the right of me is, of course, your co-host, Michael Cervo.
What's going on, Donny? Thanks for being here. Thank you for having me here. I mean, this is great. It's been a while since you and I have been in front of the mic.
Yeah, we did the first season almost 2 years now during the pandemic. And now, folks, in Season 2, we have our own studio.
Man, we leveled up, eh?
From zero to studio, real quick.
And it's a beautiful studio. If you guys can't see this, if you guys are listening to this on the audio version of the podcast, hopefully it sounds good. But if you're watching this, man, the studio's good. And there's something about just being in an environment where it just makes you feel professional. It makes you level up your game overall. And it's just it's awesome to be here.
Could you say that last year we faked it till we made it?
We kind of faked it till we made it.
If you guys listened to Season 1, it sounded like we were absolute professionals in the booth. Well, guess what? This year we made it. We have our own studio.
Yes, we got our own studio. Speaking of which, you know what? It's been a couple years. Took some time off. We're filming Season 2. Really excited about doing this. And, the topic, I think, is a relevant one. You kind of alluded to it. And it's one that every salesperson or just any person at some point in time has gone through. And it's one that you brought up to the table and said, hey, let's talk about this for episode 1.
Yeah, you know what it was is I was watching a lot of videos and fake it till you make it. It sounds so voodoo, so woo, right? But when you look at it, the greats, they put a lot of importance on it, whether it be Kobe, Jordan, but one in particular was Connor McGregor. So I wanted to take a look at it and really talk to you about this today, because we've seen it at its highest level with McGregor completely changing the paradigm of what's possible in UFC sports. Yet we're in the era of the internet hoaxers. Right. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because you see social media and all these guys with their rented Ferraris or Lamborghinis and their rented houses, and they're just, I'm not knocking on them, right? Maybe they're using that to manifest that into real life, but there's a part of the whole faking it till you make that is inauthentic, that does have this negative connotation. And then on the flip side, there's the positive side of it. The Connor McGregor is quite powerful. You watch his videos when he was younger. He says, I'm going to be in the UFC. I'm going to be a champion. And he even says, he says, if you visualize it, if you believe it enough, you can manifest it. And I think the whole idea of manifesting also has a cheesy, corny connotation. Oh yeah, manifesting, laws of attraction, all that other stuff. But to a certain extent, I think every high-performing individual has done this. When I think about fake it till you make it, every pro was an amateur at one point in time. Every champion was a contender who was pretending to be the champion when he's looking in the mirror. We are all that. We all have that. And I think the idea of fake it till you make it can be a good thing if done properly. I think for purpose of this conversation, we're going to talk about the good, when it works, when it doesn't work, and the mechanics behind it. And as a salesperson, when you could utilize that in your in your practice. But going deeper into fake it to make it, what exactly is it? What are the mechanics?
And that's what's great. This is how we can really separate the coincidental with the science. And so Scientific America actually wrote an article about this, and they had really wanted to discuss, is this a fake phenomenon? Is it a placebo? Or is there some scientific measurable aspects? And what they found was that visualization and action are intimately connected, involving the motor cortex. Imagining allows us to remember and mentally rehearse our intended movements. In fact, visualizing movement changes how our brain networks are organized, creating more connections among different regions. So in other words, the more you use it, the more your brain can understand how to connect the visualization with the actual muscles, almost rehearsing the movements with your body without actually having to do it.
I love that, because you go into the science of it. And when you break it down to real life, when you're learning how to walk, when you're learning how to lift your arms, when you're learning how to do anything, you have to think about it. Eventually it becomes natural. And I think faking it till you make it. And actually there's another way I'd like to frame it. We could talk about that a little bit later, and how to utilize words properly, because sometimes the word faking, that word alone just has this negative connotation, right? So I think we could change the wording to a certain extent to I guess reframe and rebrand that entire saying. But I love how you went into the science that eventually over time, if you're imagining it, if you're thinking it, repeating it, believing it, eventually becomes second nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the thing I really want to discuss with you today is I feel like we see a lot less of it in business and entrepreneurship, the visualization, as opposed to the fake it part. We're now in this culture where everybody wants to be rich quick. Everybody wants to show the world how successful they are. And people are getting busted left, right, and center, giving rise to specific accounts who are sick of it. So as a culture, we're so sick of fake success, fake gurus, that we actually have the antithesis, which is now these detectives like the CoffeeZillas, the Baller Busters and whatnot. But what's interesting is I find that in sports, there's a lot less of the faking it, because in sport, you can't hide behind performance. So in the sports world, they have these coaches that work so hard on visualization, whether visualize that you're a champion, visualize yourself walking through with your belts. Connor McGregor being the greatest example of this.
Yeah, even I was watching a couple of episodes of The Ultimate Fighter years ago, right? And you know, as they're training, as they're preparing for the fight, right when the training session is done, the coach says, walk around the ring, walk around the cage with your hands held high. Imagine the crowd cheering, visualize yourself winning this fight. And I think if you can't visualize the end result, then what's the point in doing that? And that's where I think you know, there's a major issue with this whole idea about faking it till you make it. Because there's this idea that if you're faking it, you're just a swindler. You're a con artist. You're just trying to trick people. But I think if you're doing, and that's an external motivation. I think if your motivation is internally, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm the best. You might not be the best right now, but if you're telling yourself, not chanting it out there, hey, I'm the best, blah, blah, blah. You know, I think that if it's done internally, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. When it's done externally, there could be some damage because you could be fooling some people. And the interesting thing is that there's a lot of young people watching these social media, you know, these gurus and believing everything that they're seeing. And then all of a sudden you're going to have this generation of people who realize it's not that easy.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that, it's almost how you use the mechanics, right? How are you harnessing this? What type of results, what kind of work are you putting together behind the fake it till you make it? As you and I have talked about here, we're using it more inspirational, aspirational, making sure that I believe beyond a reasonable doubt because I can see it, feel it, it's already happening. I just now got to put in the work. I already believe it. Whereas what we're seeing in the fake it till you make it in terms of marketing, let me just try and drum up the business. Let me try and skip the work and just fake the success, as opposed to faking the journey, faking the finish line. They're faking the success so that they can amplify their image. Much different ways of actually how to make fake it till you make it work for you.
Right. And, you know, we see this in business as well. There are cases where, you know, I truly think the person believed in the product. They just got ahead of themselves. What's that lady who... Theranos, yeah, that's a huge example.
Elizabeth Holmes.
Yeah, and, you know, she was coined to be one of the greatest game changers of all time. FTX, we saw that.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. We don't want to
Liver King,
right? But Liver King, same thing, right? So you see the end result, and are they faking it? You know, is their intention to truly trick people, or you know, are you really trying to help it? It's very, very difficult. What I think is that if you're going to utilize fake it till you make it, you need to really visualize what is the purpose. Where it goes astray is when you have no clue what exactly are you trying to fake. Are you trying to fake this persona to trick people, or are you trying to fake being somebody who you want to eventually become? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Absolutely. I'm like, hey man, you know, if you want to be a runner and you're out of shape, you tell yourself, I'm a runner. I mean, who was it? Atomic Habits. You talk about that, and you're like, hey, I'm putting my shoes on, I'm walking. Well, walking is the first step to running, right? Maybe you're not running just yet, but you kind of have to fake. You got to trick yourself. I think here's what the point I want to say is that if you're going to fake it, fake yourself, like trick yourself,
right,
versus tricking others. And I think that's where there's a huge difference.
I love this because you have a great story. You're one of the youngest executives at Sun Life Financial. And I know you had told me before about, hey, it's almost intimidating. And there was a lot of the imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
Can you share with us how you got through that and how you really rose up to that occasion?
Right. It's interesting. This is, I don't know, many years ago, and I interview well, right? So I'm pretty decent at selling myself and interviewing. And so I'm flying across the country, and following along with me is, of course, the cargo van of all my belongings that are shipped from Toronto to Calgary. And I'm flying over, and I remember looking out the window thinking to myself, I'm going to be exposed. I'm 29 years old. I just got a job as a district vice president of the largest company in Canada, one of the huge territory, multi-billion-dollar company. And I'm thinking to myself, how long will it take for them to figure out that I'm not as smart as I am, I'm not as good as I am? And literally, by the time I flew and I landed, it was actually the idea of the MBA. I was just thinking about the MBA, and this really framed my whole mindset. And I thought to myself, there's a person who's a rookie, an NBA player who sucks, but he's in the NBA. He's a pro. He belongs there. And I had to tell myself, I belong here. I'm not the best yet, but I'm here for a reason. I belong here. And I started to tell myself that I belong here. I believe in myself. And I used to tell myself that I'm the greatest speaker of all time. I would always tell myself that. And it's because naturally I was just a very shy person by nature. So when I'm in front of 500 to 1,000 people, I've spoken in front of 25,000 people before. But prior to building up to that skill level, I was really, really nervous until the point where when I'm up on stage, I don't get nervous at all. So I think when you're faking it versus fake it till you make it, just fake it till you become that person.
I want to hear your opinion on this. Fake it till you make it when done correctly, when using it to conquer your stress, your fears, the challenges ahead. I feel like part of the mechanism is not just focusing on the outcome, but when you focus on the outcome, you inherently are blocking out the negative thoughts,
right?
Of what could go wrong, the doomsday scenarios, because simply you're not wasting bandwidth on what could go wrong. I'm just going to focus on, hey, that's the finish line. I'm going to put one foot forward until we get there.
Right. Yeah. I completely agree with you, because it I guess gives you a template as to what you want to focus on. If you tell yourself that I'm going to be the greatest podcaster of all time, right? Will that ever happen? It's tough. Joe Rogan's dominated that space. There's a lot of great podcasters. But if you're telling yourself, I'm going to be the greatest podcaster of all time, you start to act like that person. You start to become a better questioner. You start to invest in better equipment. You start to really write scripts. You frame, you do things that the best would have done. And so I think what it does is it gives you this mental framework that keeps you focused. Now, the other thing that could go wrong, because fake it till you make it is all revolving around imposter syndrome. The reality is it's all revolving around imposter syndrome. If that becomes your base case, that you're constantly lying or faking it, it could actually accelerate the imposter syndrome, because you lose yourself in that entire conversation because you're so used to pretending to be someone else. So I think there's a fine line on knowing what you're going to fake and staying authentically to yourself. And I think it really comes down to what are you trying to fake, right?
I love that, because if we were to summarize all our points here, part of it seems like pick your North Star, because that's your why.
Right.
And then truly visualize who you are as a person when you get there. What does it feel like? What does it look like? What do your surroundings look like? And the more clearly that you can visualize it, the more you can help yourself believe that it's already happening. And using it as your North Star to guard you, especially in sales, I find that it helps protect your attitude.
Right.
Right. When, especially in sales, where it's such a high EQ type of transaction, and you have to stay committed to this type of focus, and your attitude, your charisma, the way that you can deflect negative thoughts in the middle of a conversation. Salespeople, we think very, very fast. We're trying to do all these hundreds of calculations on the fly with another person in front of you or over the phone. And I find that those visualizations really help, especially for me personally, just calm me down. Because all salespeople know, you could be in the middle of a pitch, somebody throws you a curveball, and it could jam you up. You could get defensive, you could get tongue-tied. But how I've used visualization is just always understanding before each call, visualize myself getting through the call, visualize myself with a big smile on the face, serving the person in front of me, making sure I'm solving a problem for them, not selling something. So then when I get hit with a curveball that didn't go the way my script was supposed to go, it's, hey, that's okay. Because that was never the intention. I'm not trying to sell this person. I'm trying to help this person. I saw this before the call, and I found that when your attitude stays a 10 out of 10, when you stay calm, for especially the vets, when you already know how to sell, you always come back to those fundamentals to really keep consistent in the high performance.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I love it, because if you don't visualize multiple different scenarios, when it happens, you're completely thrown off. And going back to one of our favorite basketball players, the late great Kobe Bryant, he would visualize taking that game-winning shot. And we've all done it as kids, just playing, your buddy says 5, 4, 3, 2, and then you shoot the ball prior to the buzzer ringing. Like, we've all visualized being that champion. We've all visualized being that winner. I think as a salesperson, if you're not visualizing yourself closing that deal, walking into that corner office, talking to that CEO, becoming the best version, maybe not the best in the company, but best salesperson or best version of yourself, what's the point? What is absolutely the point? No one goes into sales to become average.
You know what you just made me realize as you were speaking there was that there's something in common with all the greats ever, all the greatest athletes, all the greatest fighters. And that is, they all believed that they were going to be the best before they did it, which could mean that every single person who strives to be the best, these game changers, these legends, they were all faking it till they made it.
Absolutely.
How powerful is that thought? That in fact it is not just a concept that works, but the greats, the absolute, there's no legend great in any sport or any pro sports that didn't fake it till they made it to the top.
Right. And that's powerful. And that's a great way to end off this little segment of fake it till you make it. And again, those greats, Donny, they were internalizing it. They weren't trying to fool other people. And I think that's really where it comes down to. Are your intentions genuine? Are you faking it because you want to become a better person, or are you faking it to try to swindle other people? There's two ways to look at it. I choose to look at the positive side of it.
What do you guys think out there? Do you use fake it till you make it? Has it ever backfired on you? Would love to hear your stories. Write to us in the show notes. Love you guys for checking out the show here today. Again, this is Ready, Set, Sell Season 2. My name is Donny Wong, and of course, your co-host,
Michael Ciervo. All the best. Good luck, guys.
Joining, guys. Cheers.